everyone, I'm Linda Nickell, and welcome to the Happiness Hour. My goal here is to help us all connect, inspire, and create. And every week, a new guest is here to share their images and help you improve your photography skills. The schedule for our upcoming presentations is on my website at lindanickell.com. And under Happiness Hour, you'll find the links to previous sessions on my YouTube channel. Tonight's guest is Ronan Nicholson. Ronan is a bird photographer based in North Carolina, whose focus is primarily on bird photography. Ronan has traveled all over the country to build his portfolio with a variety of different species, and he is adept at working with birds in their natural habitats. In 2019, the American Birding Association named him their Young Birder of the Year. And in July, Audubon listed 2 of his images in their top 100 for 2021. In tonight's presentation, Ronan will talk about the basics of bird photography. He'll share his tips and techniques, talk about how to find cooperative subjects so that you can photograph them in the good light, how to predict when and where to get the best shots, and why it's important to utilize good field techniques so that you can make the most of every experience. If you're on Instagram, you can find Ronan at birdronan and on his website at birdron.com. Also with us tonight is Gary Farber, who's representing Hunt's Photo and Video. Their flagship store is located in Melrose, Massachusetts, with satellite stores in several other locations in the state, as well as Rhode Island, Maine, and New Hampshire. You can connect with Gary at Hunt's through their website at huntsphotoandvideo.com or on Instagram at huntsphotovideo. So welcome to the Happiness Hour, Ronan and Gary. So before you get started, Ronan, I think Gary wanted to say a few words. So if you'd like to take that opportunity, Gary, you are on.
All right. Thanks everyone for coming on and tuning into this great session. Thank you, Linda, for hosting it and doing a fabulous job. It was such an honor to meet you at the Chicago conference. I think that's where we established a working relationship, and we've been connected ever since. And also want to thank Ruth for coming on. I've known Ruth for almost 20 years, and she was a big advocate of the Nickell High School program, which I supported for the last 20 years, and it's been really an honor to support that high school program. And it's something I've always wanted to do more is work with the youth photographers. I just didn't really have any avenue other than the high school program to do it. And during COVID, I found my fish through Instagram, connecting with so many amazing young photographers that I would never have known how talented they are. It's just by Instagram going with thing and seeing all the young photographers, working with them. It's for me, it's one of the ways I got through COVID. Just so much inspiration, so much inspiring. It's just been they become my second family, and it's such an honor to work with so many amazing kids. And one of the things I did during COVID, besides, I really had to change my whole business philosophy. Before COVID, I was doing 50 shows a year all around the country. I was pretty much on the road every single weekend, and that abruptly came to the end. And I don't think people were concerned about me, because they're like, "What is Gary going to do? He's going to go out of his mind." But I actually took a positive approach. I took 2 weeks to really assess what I'm going to do. And I just didn't let the negativity get to me. All the things that go on thing. And I just said, if I'm going to do it, I got to stay positive. So I took the approach of going virtual and reaching out to all my contacts around the country. And I did over 350 Zoom presentations to photography groups all around the country during COVID, nature photography groups and stuff like that. And it allowed me during the COVID time, it allowed me to build stronger working relationships with my vendors, my regular customers, and open the doors to so many new customers between young photographers and working pros. So my relationships have actually grown stronger than they were before COVID. And so it's been a very honor to do that. And I'm going to continue, even the roads going back up. I'm going to continue to do the virtual things. And when I go back to doing in-person events, I'm going to take a much different approach. I know if you've seen me at a show before, you probably see me with a bunch of gear, and stuff like that at a table. I'm going to take a much, as you know about me, the people know me, relationships come first, sales come second. So I'm going to really take a more approach of going out in the field, working with photographers in the field, getting to know them better, providing loan gear for people to use. I'm okay doing less business at the events, but at the end of the day, getting to know my customers better. And when I work with my customers, they're family to me. They're not just like, they're not a salesperson. I treat them as family. I try to take, work out, take care of them, and be there to help them out before, during, after, and it's more than just making a sale. And that's always been my approach, but that's more my approach going forward. So
And I'm going to vouch for you, Gary, because some of these people were in the room when Noah was here, and I had introduced him by saying, the way I learned about hunts was that you guys were at the trade show at the Out of Chicago conference in Chicago. And every time I came out of a room, Gary was there with his table, and it was like Christmas time for me in August. It's like, oh, I need this. Oh, I don't even know what this does. Do I need this? And I was buying stuff. And every time I came out of a room, I left with something, because it wasn't just about the gear or the toys. It was, I just really enjoyed talking to you and learning about, the stuff that would help me do the photography that I wanted to do. And the last day of the conference, I walked out. I don't know if you're going to remember it, but I said, Gary, we're breaking up. Don't call me. Don't write me. Don't even look for me. And you laughed. You were a good sport about it. And I went home, and 2 days later, I'm like, hey, Gary, I need this. And I have a camera store here in Austin, and I can easily go down there anytime I want. But I really did like the service I had with you, and it was fun to have that relationship. So I'm happy that you're here, and I'm super, super grateful that you've introduced us to Ronan. So with that, you ready to let him take the stage?
So yes, I'm going to take it over. You guys are in for a true treat. It's going to be an amazing program. So all do, Ronan, take it away. It's all yours.
Okay. All right, Ronan, you ready to go?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Let me share my screen.
Yeah. Well, wait a minute. Before you share your screen, so I did a little introduction. What did I miss? And if you don't mention it, I'm gonna call you on it. So what would you like to kind of let people know that about your work? How did you get started? Because you're a teenager, and I don't, that is not a dig because you're young. It's like, what drew you to birds? And you want to give us a little bit of a backstory?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say it in my presentation a little bit, but I got started basically just documenting bird photos, or birds with photos, and then I like to get the good photos too. So
yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Fine. Okay. It'll just say more about that in the presentation.
In your presentation. Okay, so I don't know if you're going to cover it in the presentation, and if you don't, if you guys would go to his website, he's not just a photographer. I don't know, I'm going to get in trouble with the word, artist, illustrator. He had not enough, but you had maybe a dozen sketches of your bird, I don't know, art paintings. I mean, I think they're pencils, colored pencils, I think. And they were beautiful. So guys, if you get a chance, go look at his website, and specifically that, because the first one that drew me was the green jay, because that's a Texas, well, it's not just Texas bird, it's a Texas southern bird, and that caught my attention, and then it made me open each one of yours, and I was really impressed with your artwork. Okay.
Thank you.
So, just one last thing. Just at the end of the program, Ronan will have you'll have all his information about his Instagram account website. So he'll put that at the end of the program.
Right, and I'll include that with all of the links when I post this video. Okay, go for it, Ronan.
All right. So, hey everyone, I'm Ronan Nicholson, and today I'm going to show you the basics of getting great images of birds with just a few simple techniques. But before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm 16 years old. I live in Western North Carolina. I've been photographing birds for about 5 years. But before I was a photographer, I was a birder, or as most people know it, a bird watcher. As a birder, I'm always on the lookout for birds I've never seen before, called life birds, or birds that are rare to find in a particular region. For example, recently, last fall, I found an orange-crowned warbler in my yard. In my county, this species is only seen a couple of times every year. So finding one right next to my house was pretty cool. So when I started photography, naturally my first subjects were birds. It first began with documenting interesting species I found, but as my photos improved, my ambition to create better images grew as well. So through a GoFundMe campaign, I raised enough money for a professional level DSLR camera and lens. I started by studying my camera manual, so I knew my setup inside and out. Then I watched tutorials and read books by wildlife photographers. And after that, most of my learning came from experience with my camera in the field. So over the past year, my photos have appeared in publications like the ABA's Birding Magazine and the Living Bird Magazine by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And I think you previously mentioned this. I got a photo in the or a couple photos in the Audubon Photography Awards. Here's one of them. This one is of a double-crested cormorant I took in Salt Lake City, Utah. So apart from the obvious challenges of shooting birds, I find that they're actually very ideal subjects. They're everywhere, making them easy to find. There are many different types of birds, which means they can fit many different shooting styles. And they act very differently from each other, so you'll never get the same shot twice. So let's dive into the techniques of getting these shots. In this presentation, first we'll talk about the camera settings that I find absolutely essential for shooting birds, such as the aperture, the camera mode, the ISO, and the all-important focusing settings. Then I'll discuss how to use natural light in the field and the components that make a good composition, including the point of view of the photographer, as well as composing the background and the foreground of an image. Then after a brief question break, we'll talk about using those settings in the field, good field techniques, and how to shoot birds in different habitats. And finally, I'll point you to the physical and online resources that will help you. They help me discover some great places to photograph birds in your local area. So let's get into camera equipment. So to start, could everyone type into the chat what camera setup you're using right now?
All right, so what I'm seeing, Nikon Z6, a Sony A7R III, Olympus mirrorless. Got a couple of Olympuses.
Oh, nice.
Olympus, Sony's Canon D7 Mark II. That's with a 100 to 400 lens.
Wow.
Ben shoots with a Nikon D500. I know that Ruth, I think she sleeps with her R5 now. She loves it so much. Gail uses a Sony A7C. And then Sherry is a Sony AR7 IV. There's a Canon Mark IV. There's R5s. Yeah. So there's quite a few. There's a variety of options here. And I'm not seeing anybody. Ben Cowan, did you not put in your Nikon? Okay, he's got a Nikon. So Nikon, Ben and I are the only Nikon shooters. So there's a variety of cameras in here.
Oh, wow. That's cool. Those are all really great setups, I think. But for me, I'm using a Canon 7D Mark II and a 100 to 400 lens. I think someone else put that as well.
I think I saw that.
So as you know, birds are small, they're quick, and they fly away when you approach. So we need a decent amount of reach to photograph them. For bird photography, most of the time, I'm shooting with my lens fully extended at 400 millimeters. I would recommend not using anything under 300 millimeters for shooting birds. Anything under that is just going to be really frustrating. And if you need to get an extender or a better lens, it's definitely a good investment if you're going to continue shooting birds. Also with birds, one of the most important parts of a good image is an out of focus background. This keeps the viewer focused on the bird, which should always be the main subject. To achieve this, we also need a camera with a fairly low aperture, somewhere between f2.8 and 5.6. But if you don't have that, then just work with what you got. It's not gonna make or break the image completely. For me, I have f5.6 at 400 millimeters. So here's an example of this. In this photo, this tufted titmouse is in focus, and there's a colorful blurred background that's not distracting at all. This is a good photo because the bird is sharp and the background is very soft and colorful, which makes the bird pop in front of the background. But in this photo, the background is more in focus and it blends with the subject and the perch it's on. So the background actually takes a lot away from this image. The background is one of those things that can make or break an image. So when shooting birds, we always want to consider the background of the bird. Later, we'll talk more about how to get a good background in a bird photo, but having the lowest aperture possible is a good start. So moving on to the camera mode, I always shoot in aperture priority mode. Here's what that looks like on Canon and Nikon, and Sony's going to be similar. So for Canon, on the left, it's AV for aperture value, and on the right, Nikon is just A for aperture. On other camera systems, it should be pretty similar to this. This setting lets me choose the aperture, and as I mentioned earlier, I always choose the lowest one I can get. Then the camera will choose the highest shutter speed for that aperture. And as you can probably guess, shooting quick moving birds requires a fast shutter speed. A good shutter speed to get is 1/500th of a second, but this is not always possible. It's just ideal, so you should try to get that. If you'd like to get more creative, you can also try manual mode, but since most birds are always moving, I find that consistently changing the settings is cumbersome in the field, and I've missed shots while playing around with the settings. So I stick to aperture priority, where I know the settings will work for every picture I'm trying to take. Another important setting is the ISO. On most of my shoots, my ISO usually stays around 800, but on darker days, like when it's overcast, I set it to 1000 or 1250. On a bright sunny day, when the shutter speed is really fast, you can put the ISO down to 400 and still have a fast shutter speed, which is usually about over 1/800th of a second. Depending on the camera sensor size, pushing your ISO too high could make the image noisy. With full frame sensors, you could get away with an ISO of 2000 in low light situations, but with crop sensors like mine, I don't go past 1600. So evaluating the light outside is essential for every trip out. Before you even go looking for birds, you should look at the light outside and set your ISO higher if there's less light, or lower if it's a brighter day. Focus is another crucial aspect of bird photography. So for an engaging image, the bird's eye should be in focus. Viewers are drawn to the eye of the bird in an image, so that should be the part where it is sharp. In this photo, the eye of the hummingbird is in focus, even when the other parts are not. The back and tail of the bird are not completely in focus, which is not ideal, but it still works because the eye is sharp. So to always get the eye sharp, or at least in the main focus, I set my focusing point to the middle of the screen, and then I'll move the frame so the point is on the bird's eye. The square in the middle is where the camera focuses. Changing this focusing point for every shot takes too long for me, and the bird will already have flown away or changed position if I have to fiddle with this setting. I also keep my camera on continuous focus because the birds are constantly moving, and I don't want to refocus my camera every few seconds. And finally, for the drive mode, I always have my camera set on a continuous shooting mode. This allows me to take multiple shots and choose the best one of the series later. My high speed is at 10 frames per second, which is pretty fast. I'll use this on birds that are flying or moving quickly, but I usually keep my drive mode on the silent continuous shooting mode at 4 frames per second. And as its name suggests, it's quieter, so I can approach the birds more easily and not scare them when I take the picture. Okay, so now that we've gone through how to set up your camera, let's discuss some of the fundamentals of composing good bird photos. So as with all other photography, a good bird photo starts with good lighting. The light needs to be balanced on the subject. We want the bird's features to be clearly defined, and we want to use the light to display the bird in a unique way. Overcast days, I find, are perfect for this. In this picture, the sun was behind some trees, and it was almost dark outside, making the even lighting with the cool tone in it that you see in this photo. This picture of a mourning dove has many elements we'll be discussing. Along with the light, it has some habitat on the side and a pleasing background. One of the most important things to consider before even going outside is the lighting. The lighting should be even on the bird, so there is not very harsh shadows underneath the bird. So it's good to avoid the harsh midday light when the sun is directly above you in the sky. So instead of going out at 1 or 2 o'clock, going out a little earlier or a little later when the sun is lower on the horizon can dramatically change the outcome of your shoot. You can take this to the extreme and photograph birds right as the sun comes up, so the light on the bird is not distracting. In wildlife photography, this time is called golden hour because photos from then tend to have a warm tint. Golden hour is considered either the 2 hours after sunrise in the morning or the 2 hours before sunset in the evening when the sun is the closest to the horizon. If you're facing away from the sun, lighting during this time will be directly on your subject with no distracting shadows underneath it. This song sparrow was captured in the golden hour of the morning. Although this bird is not directly in the sun, the photo still has the warm glow from the trees in the background. And this photo of a Say's phoebe was taken in the late afternoon, just before sunset. I positioned myself so the sun was directly behind me to get the warm light on the bird without any shadows. Just like golden hour, the time before sunrise or after the sunset is known as the blue hour. Blue hour is also a good time to photograph birds because the light here is even, and because the sun is not visible, it gives a cooler tone instead of a warm one from the golden hour. I got this photo when I was out birding one morning before the sun came up. I like how the blue light emphasizes the green setting and the dew on the ground in this image. Here's another shot I took during blue hour, but after the sun went down. Just like in the last photo, the tones are cooler, which brings out the blue and the purple elements of the bird and the background. Experimenting with these color temperatures is so convenient because both of these 2 hours are back to back. So I like to start shooting before dawn in blue hour, then an hour later when the sun comes up for golden hour, I'll be shooting in a completely different setting, and my photos will look very different than they did just an hour earlier. It also happens to be the time of day where birds are out the most, so it works out really well. One evening, I took this photo of a golden-crowned sparrow in my backyard after the sun went down. It was taken during blue hour, so it has a lot of blue in the image. Then the next morning, I went outside and took this photo. This was taken after the sun came up, so it has the warmer tones than the other photo. The only difference is the time I took them. It's probably even the same bird. So far, we've talked about using the sunlight at the beginning and the end of the day. But what about taking photos during the day? Often, direct sunlight can be harsh around noon, creating blown out images and distracting shadows. But if there are other weather conditions involved, it can often make for interesting photographs. For example, I photographed this American goldfinch on an overcast day, which dispersed the light nicely across the subject. Cloudy days are great for shooting birds all day because you don't have to worry about whether the light is harsh or not, or where it's coming from. All you need to do is find a bird that will let you take photos of it. So fog is another great atmosphere where you can take some visually stunning photos. In this photo, the fog makes this American coot feel ominous with the other coots lurking in the background. On rainy days, it's harder to take photos because you, and more importantly, your camera gear gets wet. So to get around this problem, I bought an inexpensive and lightweight rain cover to slip over my camera and lens when it starts to pour or snow. I recommend this if you're doing any photography in the rain or you're planning on doing any photography in the rain. So for this photo, instead of staying home, I deliberately went out in the rain to shoot ducks at a nearby lake. The rain in the photo, the gray clouds, and this mallard looking directly at you give this image a moody feel. Snow can also give different feelings to a photo. The sunlight on the bright red cardinal contrasts with the snowy field in the foreground, giving this image an optimistic feel of the day after a storm. So apart from lighting and weather, a photographer's point of view has a huge impact on an image. As a general rule, you should always strive to get eye level with your subject. If the bird is on the ground or in a lake, this often means getting low for a better image. This has multiple effects. Images with birds at eye level make it easier for viewers to connect with a subject. Also, when you're standing up, the background, which is the ground, is closer and consequently more in focus. As I discussed earlier, an in-focus background can be distracting. But by getting on the ground, you increase the distance between the subject and the background, giving it a blurred effect. Let's see what this looks like in practice. So when I took this shot, I was standing up, which puts the ground right behind the bird. As you can see, large amounts of dirt are in focus, and the bird gets lost in what is the background. But here, for this photo, I was on the ground, and even though there's a lot of brush behind the bird, the distance between it and the subject, along with a low aperture, blurs it out fairly well, making for a pleasing image. Getting your camera closer to the ground can be uncomfortable, especially when you find yourself lying in a bed of rocks. Thankfully, though, there are lots of tools that can make it easier. You can get a ground level tripod, as shown in the top left image, or you can rest your camera on a beanbag, like in the photo on the top right. Several of the mirrorless cameras have rotating screens, like the image on the bottom right. This can save your neck, but you'll have to watch out for the screen glare from the sun. In the bottom middle is a ground pod, which lets you get even closer to the ground than a tripod does, while giving your camera some good stability. And finally, on the bottom right, you'll see an angle finder. This attaches to your viewfinder, so you can look down instead of lying with your head up, looking through the viewfinder. But for now, I just lie on the ground and get dirty. But eventually I'll probably using up an angle finder and ground pod or something else that will help me with this. The main point though is that you have to find what tool or method works best for you to get closer to the ground and eye level with the birds. So let's move on to our last topic with composition. Let's talk about the background, the foreground, and everything else surrounding the bird. So apart from blurring the background, we can use contrasting colors to make the bird stand out. In this photo, I positioned myself so that this white snowy egret would stand out in the dark background of the water. But when you're photographing brown or gray birds, you can get them against bright colored backgrounds to make the bird more prominent. In this photo, this drab sandpiper is standing in a sea of blurry green to make it the center of attention. But in the opposite, if you're photographing bright birds, putting them against a muted background can have a similar effect. When I saw this bright red cardinal on a dreary day, I positioned myself so that it was right in front of a bunch of drab trees so that it stands out very well. Adding foreground elements to an image can give the photo more depth. The blurred pine needles in the foreground of this photo help to bring out the one in the bird that is in focus. This makes it feel as if this acorn woodpecker is in a dense forest. In a similar way, I use this field of flowers to show the depth of the meadowlark's habitat as it sang one morning. Like the background isn't a huge part of this image, but it's mostly the foreground. So we'll just pause for a moment. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat window and I'll answer some of them.
Okay, so I have one question I'm looking at now. Susan is asking, do you ever shoot on manual? Because you had mentioned you shoot in aperture priority.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've tried it, but I'll either have to get really good at it or I'm not practicing to get really good right now.
Okay.
Because I find it takes a lot of time. I'll probably look at that in the future, but for now I don't.
Well, aperture priorities is working just fine for you. So I make things really hard, and I shoot manual and it is hard. It's difficult. My brain doesn't move. My brain moves faster than my fingers, or something doesn't connect, but yeah. You guys feel free to add any other questions in there. But
now that we've talked about the camera and the composition, let's move into the field, and more specifically, the types of locations you'll be taking bird photos in. Birds behave differently depending on their habitat. So in this section, we'll discuss the most likely places you'll be photographing birds and some of the challenges you may face while you're there. So depending on where you live and your ability to travel, there are many places to find great birds to photograph. We'll start off by talking about places right outside your home, like your backyard, your patio, or the local park. Next, we'll move further away to the city, from the city, and cover where and how to find the right subjects in nearby forests and lakes and rivers. This may be pine forests, deciduous forests, or just anywhere with a collection of trees. Desert brush and other open areas are also often teeming with birds. I'll show you how to take advantage of these locations to get the best bird shots in there. This is pretty much anywhere with low bushes or plants, such as fields or even wetlands. And finally, if you happen to be on one of our coasts or making a trip there, we'll talk about how you can get great photos on the shores or near the ocean. So your own backyard or park around the corner can be some of the best places for bird photography for many reasons. Because you have the most access to these places, you can scout out great locations and revisit them regularly at different times of the day. Also in these spots, you can lure your subjects with food or discover where the birds like to hang out. And these are good places to get acquainted with your camera settings and practice your techniques before heading out into other habitats. So starting with your backyard, you can take food that you already have in your cupboards and spread it around on flat surfaces somewhere outside your home. Birds love things like peanuts, apples, raisins, and even bananas and other fruit like that. Over the course of a week or so, the birds in the area will begin to see your patio or yard as the new restaurant in town, and they'll even invite their friends. Then all you have to do is find a great hiding spot, like from an open window, and fire away. So for this shot, I put a handful of peanuts on the railing of our deck. And after a few days, I eventually got this shot of a blue jay scarfing them down. If you're looking to attract a wider range of birds, you can get a bit fancier and hang a bird feeder from an overhanging tree or on your property. I found the best bait in this situation is black oil sunflower seeds. All types of birds love it, and in a 10 or 20 pound sack is relatively cheap at your local hardware store. So from this shot, I loaded my feeder with this very tempting seeds, and I put it in a wooded area of my yard. After a few days, the birds started coming by the hordes, and I managed to catch this image of a pine siskin snatching a seed from the feeder just before it flew away. Feeding birds with seeds can also be very expensive. This bird was in a big flock, about 50. It stayed for a couple days, and I had to fill the feeder up every 2 days, and they're just eating it like crazy. So local parks are also another excellent place to get bird shots and extend your portfolio. The first place to start here is to scout out cooperative birds on the ground that are foraging for food or nesting material. By cooperative, I mean as you slowly move closer to the bird, it doesn't run or fly away. Once you discover where the local birds like to hang out, patience on your part is the key. Sometimes hanging out behind bushes or buildings for several minutes and then slowly approaching the bird can do wonders. For this shot, I walked around a local park until I found this killdeer. Then I got on the ground and I waited for it to approach me and quickly got this image. I was really surprised when I got this because these birds are usually pretty skittish and they fly away very quickly. But once I got on the ground and I didn't look very threatening, then this bird came up and approached me. So parks with trees around their edges or underdeveloped wooded areas are also a prime place to expand your wildlife photography skills. If you spend most of your time in a city, these types of parks offer wilderness habitats you can revisit often. Here you'll find birds that you won't often see in city streets or on manicured landscapes. For this shot, I followed a flock of birds into the outskirts of a prominent sports center just a few minutes down the road from my house. While this facility hosts soccer, football, and rugby matches on the weekends, I found it to be a great location for birds during the week. While photographing birds in forests and lakes require different techniques, I've put them together here because you'll find forests and lakes together in the same habitat. So if you enjoy nature, chances are you'll already know of some great hiking spots within an hour or so of your home. So in this section, I'm going to focus on the photography techniques you use when you find yourself in these types of locations. In the forest, birds tend to stay in the tops of the trees. However, because we're trying to get a photo of a bird at eye level, this is not an ideal situation. So I look for dense plants near the ground where birds are most likely to come down and eat from. Since birds in this habitat are always moving together, I'm usually always walking and looking for flocks. Here I find it helpful to handhold my camera without a tripod. To get this photo, I followed a flock of birds moving through the trees. As I watched them, this worm-eating warbler flew down to a branch above me where I was able to get a good shot of it. Getting the right composition in the woods can be tricky. Birds like places near the edge of the forest, so look for them where there are not very many trees. This also helps the light in the photos to look natural, while not being too dark. Once I find a flock, I watch the birds closest to me and wait for them to come out of the deeper parts of the brush. This blue-headed vireo was around the edges of the group of trees when I took this shot. Lakes can often be found with forests. When I go to lakes for photography, I like taking photos of ducks and geese. Ducks do not move nearly as much as birds in the forest, so they are easier to get photos of. The first thing you should do at a lake is to find where the ducks are. Usually, there will be a flock of ducks or geese somewhere along the shore of a lake. When you find the ducks, you should wait and don't make any sudden movements. Then they'll start to trust you. I waited a while before taking this photo. Then this duck swam up to me and flapped its wings when I could get this shot. Since ducks don't move around as much as other birds, if you observe them long enough, you can tell when they'll do something like flap their wings or dive underwater. And you can use that to start taking photos at the right moment. I saw these ducklings trying to eat insects above the water, so I waited until they stopped jumping out of the water and resulted with this image of the duckling looking into the swarm of bugs. The next habitat is brush and desert, which is anywhere with low plants around eye level, like wetlands, a field, or a desert. These places are pretty easy to find. Places with low plants are near the edges of the pond, bushes around buildings, and at nature preserves. Birds that like this habitat like looking around. Basically, they like perching on other taller plants where there is no foliage around them. Birds in this habitat can be found on fences or around fields, or looking for bugs in the fields. Once I find a bird in the brushy habitat, I wait for it to come out on the top of the shrub it's in. Then I can get good photos of it without a distracting background. I had to get lower than my eye level for this one because this sparrow chose a hill to perch on instead of the top of a bush or something. Good places with brush habitat are protected areas for wildlife, like nature preserves. Birds like to sing from the tops of plants, so I always listen carefully when I find brushy areas. This red-winged blackbird was singing from the top of this shrub at a nature preserve I visited last year. He was deeper in the shrub, but I waited until he came out in the open on top of the plant, and I got this photo. Shooting the birds in the desert is a little different than other places with low plants. In the desert, birds like to look for food on the ground between bushes and are usually hard to see until they fly from the ground. This sparrow is only found in the desert, so I like this shot where I got its habitat in the photo as well as the bird. Since there are a lot of other tall plants that birds like to perch on in the desert, it's also a great place to take silhouette photos and get a little more creative. In the desert, there are many plants with interesting shapes, so they are perfect for this type of photo. In this picture is a small bird called a verdin on a plant in the desert. And that's it for the brush and desert habitat. Finally, we have the shores and the ocean. So the beach is a great place to find birds. If you walk up and down the beach, you'll probably find shorebirds like these ones. Birds on the beach are not very challenging to photograph. When I was walking the beach, I found this bird on. I found a group of shorebirds that were looking for food in the sand. And then I just took this photo of it because they don't fly away that quickly. Certain beaches are off limits to the public because they are bird nesting areas where large colonies of birds can sometimes be found. So before you visit a beach, you should look up which bird colonies are in that area or where you can find a lot of birds like that. At a colony of black skimmers in southern New Jersey, these skimmers were fighting over their territories on the beach. However, beaches and sand aren't the only place to find birds at the ocean. I always scan the rocks by the ocean because birds will often be hiding in between them. That is where this bird was. The ocean makes a really nice background for this photo, and many of my shots from the sea have a great background of the ocean. The This bird was also from a colony nesting on the shore. There is so much activity at the ocean that it's a good idea to look in the sky every once in a while. Many birds are found in public locations on the beach, as well as piers and shops. These ones are always very approachable because they are used to people from everyone visiting the beach. And that concludes the habitats you will probably find outdoors. So a lot of times birds are not found by just walking down the street. And when you go on a trip to photograph birds, how do you know where to go? There are a couple of resources I use to find out where the most birds are in my area and where it would be easiest to photograph them. So for example, say I'm in Northern California and I want to photograph this bird, which is called the snow goose. It's the middle of summer and I take a trip to the best place to see them, but there aren't any there. If I went to the same place, but in the winter, I would find hundreds of thousands of this bird. Of course, this is on the extreme side, but every bird varies. And the time of year and the weather patterns can make a big difference in the success of an outing. Like most things, one of the best ways to learn when and where to find birds in your region is just trial and error. But there are resources out there that are very helpful for finding birds in your local area. Something I use a lot is a physical book called a field guide. These have pictures comparing all the birds in a region to one another, identification tips, and maps of where they are all found. I could also see when snow geese are in the area from a field guide. Here are some of my favorite field guides. The author, David Sibley, has guides for every region in the United States and Canada. So this is a great resource that I've found. And I would highly recommend this to anyone looking for birds. So you can see we have like the cover, it's very nice. And there's the species names near the top, a description, pictures of the species in all the different plumages you could find it in, a description of its voice near the bottom, and a map of where they can be found, color coded to what times of year they can be found there. Here's another field guide I really like using. This one is from National Geographic. This one has a different layout from the other one, but it's the same kind of thing. One of my favorite online resources for finding birds near me is a website called eBird. eBird is a citizen science project used by over 500,000 people around the world. People add lists of the birds they saw at any place in the world to the project, and all the data from the observations are turned into maps of where and when the species can be found. It also makes other things that are helpful to find birds. From this, I could also tell that these geese are only found in Northern California in the winter, which would save me a whole trip to look for them at other times of year. I'll put the names of both of these resources in the chat. So in general, wildlife refuges, bird sanctuaries, and other protected areas for wildlife are great places to find and photograph birds. Once you find good spots, it's always good to visit them often. Getting to know a place and its birds is a good practice for anyone interested in photographing or even just watching wildlife. While at the photography patch you found, it's good to make a point to observe your subject while you're shooting, so you can predict what it's going to do and position yourself to get the best shot. Overall, patience will help you the most with bird photography. Just because you didn't get the shot you wanted doesn't mean you should stop trying. I'd love to see all of your work and how you're getting better at bird photography. So you can find me on Instagram, email me, or visit my website. And that's pretty much what I have.
That was a lot of information. So let me get you to take down your screen because I want to complain because I have like a whole yard full of sparrows and not one of them has a little yellow crown on it. So I would actually find sparrows a little bit more exciting if they had, was it orange crown or yellow crown? But they had a little, yours did anyways. It was.
Yeah, that one was a golden crowned sparrow.
Golden crowned, okay, golden crowned. Yeah, my sparrows are just plain Jane brown birds. So I'm a little jealous of that. So Susan, this is a great question, Susan. She wants to know, Ronan, are any other people in your family into birding?
Oh, no one in my family's into birding. In fact, my siblings really don't like it.
Well, you're probably holding them up for something fun because that's the thing about I've learned when I go shoot wildlife. people that are not into photographing wildlife do not want to sit there and wait. And what are we waiting for? I'm like, we're waiting for something. I'm waiting for something spectacular to happen. And they're just kind of like, oh my God, you know, it's eating again. Oh, wait a minute, it's going to take a nap. So yeah, I can do that. Well, okay. I want to thank you for coming and doing this because that is, I mean, it's kind of tough to come to a room full of strangers. And I thought you did a great job. And it was lovely to have you. So, okay, is there anything that you want to, you know, close us out with? Have it like, what's your best tip? What's your takeaway? What's our takeaway of your presentation? Patience, good light. If there's only one thing that I, as a new birder, need to remember, what would that be?
Well, of course, patience and experience is the best thing, but also looking like the lighting and what times of year are good to photograph birds. Those can also help you a lot.
Yeah. One of the things that it was like the end of your presentation, I have the Sibley book and I have the Nat Geo book, and I haven't used it very much. But the takeaway for me of your presentation was at the very bottom of those pages, the time of year you can find those birds. It never occurred to me that would be an option. I'm always okay. I'm here now. What's here? And I'm not a planner that way. So that was a great tip for me. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Most of the time, in field guides, you'll find purple will be year round. Like you can find them all the year. You'll have yellow be just for migration passing through.
Okay.
And red will be summer, and blue will usually be winter. But those will kind of vary up, so you have to kind of check the key.
I need to pull out that book a little bit more. Gary, is there anything you want to say real quick?
No, I just want to say thank you, Ronan, for coming on. You did an amazing job. I'm very proud of you and everything you did. It was really good, and just thank you so much, and thank Linda for having me on. And I look forward to doing more with Linda and the team and bringing more programs to you guys.
Great.
So that's it. Unless anybody else has any other questions for Ronan or myself.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any of those. So let me just double check real quick, because sometimes they sneak in after I say, oh, there's not any questions in here. There are some.
Ronan, why don't you tell people a little bit when did you actually get into photography, and what made you get into photography? What inspired you to do photography? I think you started as a birder and then you did photography. Why don't you tell a little bit about how you started as a bird? Am I correct? You started as a birder and did photography. So
yeah,
want to tell people how you progressed in that?
Yeah, so first I started as a birder. My spark bird was a California scrub jay in my yard because I used to live in California. Then I started using our family camera to go around and take pictures of birds, and I really liked it when I got like a rare species or something. Then after I've been using that for like a couple years, I realized that it wasn't what I needed to get good shots anymore. Like I needed something better. So then I finally made a GoFundMe, got all my family and relatives to pitch in, and I got a decent setup for bird photography. And I've been using that for the past 2 years. And some of my trips have been really like bad. I've been shooting in JPEG for a whole trip, which is not good. So I've been learning a lot over the years.
Well, it seems like it doesn't matter how long you've been shooting, you're always going to learn. Because I thought, well, I've got this nailed down. And then somebody would tell me, hey, you can do this. No, I didn't know. But I think photography it's a constant, I mean, it's always going to be challenging. Because for me, it's like, oh, I got that bird. Now I'm looking for this bird. So everything we do. And I think that's what keeps us interested. And, for me, it's kind of a scavenger hunt. Birds are hard. They are very difficult for me. And so when I do get a sharp eye, I get a little excited about it. So I appreciate, the time and effort because there's a lot of birders in this room that love this photography genre. So I'm just very pleased and very grateful for you coming on and sharing what you know with this group. You guys, you can connect with Ronan on Instagram at birdronan and through his website at birdron.com, and I'll link those in the show notes. And you can reach out to Gary at huntsphotoandvideo.com or on his Instagram or on their Instagram at huntsphotovideo. So the last session of the year is scheduled on December 15th. And I can't believe it's right around the corner, but I thought it would be fun to do a show and tell to celebrate the images that you've been making this year. So if you'd like to share one of your photos and the story behind the shot, please send me your photo at cousinlinda@gmail.com by December 1st. And on that show, I'm going to have you guys join us on screen to talk about what inspired you to create it, maybe some of the challenges you had, maybe we had a speaker that might have inspired you to try something outside of what you normally shoot. So if you'd like to participate in that, just send me an image or a note at cousinlinda@gmail.com, and I'll work with you on getting that together. Just a reminder that we are not meeting next week, so enjoy your Thanksgiving holiday. And please, please, please come back on December 1st, because Chris Fitch will be here to present What is Your Camera Telling You? So until next time, go out and create something beautiful, and I hope that we see you again soon.